So I will give an insight of circular innovations, and then we will move into the two areas of end of waste and byproducts, which are defined in the Waste Framework Directive. When we speak about circular economy, we should speak about circular innovation. Circular innovation, we intend those innovations also at production or recycling facility, which are aimed to save resources, which are aimed to prevent the creation of waste, and which are also aimed to recycle the waste. We intend for secondary raw materials those materials which can replace virgin materials deriving from production residues or deriving from waste recycling. Circular innovations have the main goal to reduce the amount of raw material, primarily raw material that have been extracted and used for production process, and at the same time the aim is to reduce the amount of waste that goes in our landfill or that is also going into incineration, because incineration it can of course be connected with waste energy recovery, but it's not in the top of the waste hierarchy. As was also mentioned by our, I guess, also Sardinian colleague Federico Porra before, we should connect policy, we should connect regulators, and with regulators I mean local authorities, so inspection authorities and permitting authorities on the ground. And we should connect also with businesses, because they have different roles and different problems. Regulators are those authorities asked to give permit, for example, to recycling of waste or to byproducts in some cases. Businesses, of course, they want certainties for the investment. They want to be sure that the rules are common, are transparent, are clear, and sometimes when we speak about end of waste or byproducts, sometimes rules are not applied the same way across Europe. And policymakers, of course, should create those conditions to promote the market for secondary raw materials, which is the main role of regulators. And here we have regulators in this room, competent authorities for permitting or for inspections. From one side, they have the role to promote eco-innovation. They have to promote the market for secondary raw material and help and support businesses. But at the same time, they have to prevent new waste crime. When we have to be conscious that when we also speak about new innovation, new circularity, recycling of waste, there are also criminal organizations that can make money from that. And so the role of inspectorate and of public authorities is also to prevent this new waste crime, and so to assess compliance with waste regulation. So at the same time, to comply with this rule, regulators should be technical skilled, should create a strategy, and this strategy should comply, for example, database for storing relevant information, a strategy for compliance promotion, a strategy for transparency, risk assessment also to prioritize permitting and inspection authority and inspection activities, and also have to liaise internally and externally with other authorities, with businesses as well. Mr. Federico Porra already told us which are the initiatives running under the Circular Economy Action Plan related also to secondary raw materials, so I don't want to spend time on this. But it's important to say that so far secondary raw materials still have to tackle some obstacles in terms of performance, availability and cost, meaning that the secondary raw material, and I mean again for example, products coming from waste recycled or production residues should have the same performance as the virgin material. Otherwise, businesses or industries are not asking for this material to replace virgin material if they have not the same performance. There is a problem of availability, and there is a problem of cost, because sometimes it's much more effective and has a lower cost to buy virgin materials rather than recycled materials that has probably, of course, the most environmental benefit, but they have an higher cost, and so businesses are not buying these materials. These are the goals set in the Green Deal and in the Circular Economy Action Plan related to promoting the market for secondary raw materials. Some of them have been already mentioned. We should mention that European Commission wants, and this plan wants also to go deeper into the development of criteria for end of waste, in order to homogenize also these criteria across Europe and harmonize these criteria. There is quite a strong effort in the restriction on the use of substances of very high concern in order to phase out these substances from the products to make them more recyclable. And there will be also the establishment of a market observatory for key secondary materials. I just want to mention some important documents from European Commission. This is a study from 2020 where the Commission wanted to assess which is the level and approaches of implementation of the end of waste and byproducts regulation across Europe in order to check if there are some gaps in the implementation and to check where are the key points to furtherly work in order to homogenize this criteria. This document is quite old, but it's the guidance on interpretation of the concept of the main directive of waste directive, and the concept of byproduct and end of waste are here explained. When, just to be clear, when we speak about byproducts, we are speaking about something that is not waste. So we are in the step of the hierarchy that is related to prevention of waste, because we are reusing a production residue. When we speak about end of waste, we are recycling a waste. But both are related, both concepts are related to production residues and to the industrial processes. There is, in this diagram, you can see that from industrial process, they produce, of course, product, but they produce also production residues. These production residues can meet byproduct conditions set in the waste directive, and so they are not a waste and can be directly used again as a product, or can be used as a secondary raw material, as an input material in a new or in a different or in the same industrial process. If this production residues is considered to be a waste, so the operator is discarding this material, this waste can again become a secondary raw material, provided that it undergoes waste recycling treatment. So in the bottom we have to comply with the waste legislation. In the upper part of the figure we have to comply with the chemical and products regulations. What is missing here is the consumption phase, because consumption phase is not directly connected, in particular with the byproduct concept, and we will see later on. This is again, we have an industry, an installation, could be an ID, for example. This installation is producing a production residue that has to comply both with the waste directive, but it has to comply also probably with REACH regulation to be considered a product. So to sum up, end of waste is a waste that undergoes a waste treatment and becomes a new product. Byproducts, it's never a waste. It's something that is never a waste. Waste or not waste, it's quite a key question and still difficult to decide sometimes, because you have to pose this question on a case by case, and conditions can be very different, and probably the solution for one case doesn't fit to another case. So it's quite an important question. Here are some figures, just to pose you some doubts probably. Sometimes you can have in the supermarket some orange juice. You have the possibility to have your orange juice by yourself, and there are residues of these oranges. And these residues can be furtherly used, but is it a product? Is it a byproduct? Is it a waste? The answer is different also in different member states. You can have tires, and these tires can be used, for example, to put your vegetables, or these tires can be used for pavement, road pavement, or for basketball courts, for example. And is it a waste? It's not a waste, it's a byproduct. So again, the answer is not easy. It should be posed case by case. And the answer can also be different again from member state to member state, from my experience. Plastic can be recycled and become again a product. Or another typical example is clothes. Clothes can be reused or can be deposited in some bins along the streets. Sometimes they should be considered waste, according at least to Italian legislation. Sometimes they are not. They cannot be considered as a waste. Another typical example is, for example, soil and stones. If we think about excavation of buildings, soil and stone can be reused. Can be reused in the same place, can be contaminated or not contaminated, should undergo a treatment to remove contaminants. So there are different cases in which this soil and stone can be considered as not a waste, or sometimes is a waste that should be recycled, or sometimes it can also be considered as a byproduct. According to the Court of Justice, waste is, and also the waste legislation, waste is a substance or object that the holder is intended to discard or is required to discard. And according to the Court of Justice, the economic value of this waste is not decisive to decide if it is a waste or not. It doesn't worth if it worth or not. The assessment should be made on a case-by-case basis, and of course we should take into account always the level of protection of the environment. According to the criminal cassation of Italy, we have other hints. For example, if we have some material, we can call it material, that are abandoned in a land, and this land has a fence, for example, so it's protected by the external people, this fence or the closure of the area is not enough to say that that material cannot be considered as a waste. Because what is crucial is the intention of the holder. And waste does not lose this status if there is also an agreement with the third parties with an economic value. The economic value of this material is not crucial to decide if it's waste or not. So waste, and to decide if it's a waste or not waste, we should consider a lot of parameters, a lot of components, and the key point is that we have to decide on a case-by-case basis. Let's go to the end of waste. How we should prove that a waste that has been recycled has really ceased to be a waste and can be considered as a product. Having the possibility to also see what member states have done, we have seen that they have used quality protocols, they have used checklists for inspectorate, we should consider the connection with REACH and the connection with waste shipment regulation. We should consider the environmental standard and the technical standard that this material has to comply. And we also have to store this information in database. According to the legislation, so end of waste is a waste which has undergone a recycling operation, and it is a product and not anymore a waste if it complies with 4 conditions. The 4 conditions are the ones stated in the Waste Directive, and the substance or object is to be used for a specific purpose. And I want to highlight that in the revision of the directive, the word commonly has been deleted, meaning that now we are also referring to new products, so to something that was unknown before. So we are opening the stage to also new innovations, new products that pose also problems to competent authorities which have to permit this, something that they don't know for the time being. Another condition is that a market for this substance should exist and should be certified in some way. The substance should fulfill some technical requirements and also should not pose adverse environmental impact. So this product has to comply with technical and environmental standard. So again, removing the word commonly means that we are opening to new market opportunities, to eco-innovation, to circular innovation, as I mentioned it at the beginning of my presentation. The Commission shall adopt implementing acts and can establish criteria on the application of the condition just mentioned before. And this condition, this criteria should focus on the waste input that are admissible in the recycling plant, the treatment, the kind of treatment, the criteria, the quality criteria, so the technical standards and the environmental standards. And always a statement of conformity is required to make this product be free to serve in the market. So far, we have only 3 end-of-waste regulation on EU level. These are iron, steel and aluminum scrap, glass cullet, copper scrap. The intention of the Commission was not to go on with European regulation on end-of-waste criteria, but to leave the definition of these criteria at national level or also at regional level, at local level. So where criteria has not been set at European level, it will be the member state to have the commitment to define detailed criteria on the application of the condition. And if it's not the national government, it will be the regional authority, the local authority, to define criteria on a case-by-case basis, or these criteria should be verified. What does it mean? It means that we will have 3 levels for the definition of end-of-waste criteria. One is the European level, but we have just 3 regulations. They are not enough, of course. The second level is national level, so we can have national decrees, and I will tell you what Italy has done so far. And this national decree should be notified to the Commission. There is a database called TRIX where this information can be found. And if we have a lack of EU regulation or national regulation, it will be the local authority to have the commitment to issue permits for end-of-waste on a case-by-case basis. And you can imagine how it's difficult for public officers at local level to have the responsibility on their shoulder to decide if a new innovation can be granted with an end-of-waste status. So this poses a lot of problems. The approaches across Europe to decide about the end-of-waste status are very different. We have we can divide Europe in south and north, and we can say that in the south of Europe, so Italy, Spain, countries like that, we have a rigid approach. So end of waste recycling installation should be granted with a permit, with an authorization. It's very rigid, it's very prescriptive. In the north of Europe, there is much more flexibility. So Sweden or the north of Europe, Netherlands, and operator businesses to have the possibility to market at the end of waste, so new products. They don't need an authorization. They can self-assess this material as a product, and it will be up to the inspection authority to assess, to verify if the product really complies with the conditions and criteria set in the waste directive. From one side, of course, it's a big benefit for operators because the procedure is very speed, it's quick, it's flexible. On the other side, the government should have an inspection system in place that can really, you can really trust on their effectiveness to check the compliance with the European regulation.
5 minutes.
Okay, a break?
No, 5 minutes.
Okay. That's the end of waste. Case-by-case database is something that we are working on Impel, constructing a database to store this case-by-case experience. I can skip this part, and we know that the end of waste can be used direct as a secondary raw material in industries, can be used directly in the environment. You can think of compost, for example, can be used in road construction, for example, so from businesses which do not need any environmental authorization, or can be also directly used in the market. Let me skip this presentation. Just want to mention that REACH regulation is something that, of course, is very important because it should be complied by new products, and is something that should be in mind. What Italy does for end of waste, we can grant permits to waste recycling installation with under ID, under Industrial Emission Directive, or also under the Waste Directive, or we also have a speed procedure called simplified procedure. So they don't need any authorization, they just have to communicate the competent authority that they are undergoing a recycling activity, but they have to comply with the national decree defining the quantities, the input waste, and also the kind of product. If they don't comply, it will be up to the inspection authority to check. And once they send this communication, in 90 days, if they don't receive any negative feedback from the competent authority, they can start the authorization. So the process is very quick. We have set 5 national decrees: paper and cardboard, rubber, diapers, bituminous conglomerate, and solid recovered fuels. So we have national end of waste decrees for these 5 waste streams, and we also have regulation for biomethane. In the permitting process, the inspection authority, so my agency, for example, should give a mandatory opinion on the permit. And that is because we want to guarantee homogeneity and uniformity in the case-by-case permit granted to operators. That's why also we have an Italian guideline setting conditions for how to permit and how to inspect end-of-waste recycling activities. All the authorizations are registered in a national decree, in a national database called RECHER, where we want to store all the authorization to recycling activities. When we go to inspect recycling installation, we have priorities, and these priorities are set in the waste directive. So we go to inspect waste streams that pose a higher risk to human and environment, waste subjected to innovative recovery process, and also waste going abroad in other member states to be reused. This is the Italian guideline setting conditions and criteria for permitting an inspection. This is aimed to give uniformity in the evaluations of the competent authorities. And this is a flow chart for inspections of end of waste that should not be performed only at the recycling facility, but also downstream and upstream. Coordination of inspection activity, of course, is important because we have many different pieces of legislation: REACH, shipment of waste, ID, industrial emissions, so we have to liaise also with other competent authorities. A few words about byproducts. Byproduct, as I mentioned, is never a waste, is a residue, production residue that can be directly reused. Let's see some pictures because sometimes it's misleading. That is something that we faced during an inspection. It was a tiled factory, and these were broken tiles. This was a huge hill, probably was 5-6 meters high, and they said it's a byproduct for us. We can reuse. This is a huge hill of broken bricks. A brick factory. They say these are byproducts for us. And this is chemical plants, and this is a huge amount of gypsum. And we know that gypsum has for sure a market. So is market enough to say that it's a byproduct? According to the EU legislation, byproduct is something, the result of a production process which is not aimed to the production of this residue. And it's a byproduct and not a waste if it complies with these conditions. So the use is certain, and this is something that was lacking in the figures that I showed you before. The use, the certain use, was not certain. It was there, that material was there for years. The substance should be directly used only with the normal industrial practice. And further use is lawful, so this product should comply again with environmental and technical standards. Let's keep industrial symbiosis. According to the Italian legislation, so far we have 3 decrees for 3 streams of production residues: soil and stones. So soil and stones under certain conditions can be considered a byproduct and not a waste, and so can be reused. Biomass for energy, and digestate for agronomic use. It's important just to mention that, for example, if we think about construction building waste, that is very common and it's a big amount, this cannot be considered as a byproduct. Why? Because according to the Italian criminal cassation, construction, building and demolition is not a production process. So according to European Commission directive, byproducts should derive from production process. And according to our court, this demolition waste is not, demolition building is not a production process. These are how to assess condition. For example, of course, if we have to prove that the certain use, so we have to prove by means of contracts, so the operators to exhibit to the competent authority the existence of contracts, so we are sure that this material is really sold and is really reused in other industrial process. According to the criminal cassation, normal industrial practice is something that should be performed, and we cannot include in the normal industrial practice those treatments that should make the production residues aligned with environmental standard or to be reused in the production process. So it should be reused as it is, more or less. It should comply with environmental standards and technical standards where they exist, of course. Yes, we have a national decree supporting operators, giving them instructions on and hints on how to comply with all the 4 conditions of the legislation. And these operators can be also included in a special list of the Chamber of Commerce. Okay, just one slide to close. Just to sum up, key points of byproducts. Byproducts do not require, at least in Italy, do not require any permit. It's not permitted, it's self-assessed by the operators, and it's up to the inspection authority to check if the operator is complying, is that material complies with the Waste Framework Directive conditions. Consumption residues, so the orange peels that you have in the supermarket after your orange juice, according to in Italy, cannot be a byproduct because orange juice, making your orange juice in the supermarket is not a production process. And you need contract. You need to show certainties of contract, objective of reuse, the proof of the destination, the proof of the market, and process of use previously identified and defined. This was a very quick overview of what we do in Italy and of these pieces of legislation in Europe of end-of-waste and byproducts. Thank you.
Bu yan ürün olma şartlarından bir tanesi de ihtiyaç olmalı pazarda diye sunumda bahsedildi. Ancak mesela kişi ya da kurum ya da endüstriden, sanayiden firma ihtiyacını gösteriyor bunun ilk başta. Bu izni alırken. Ancak ileriki yıllarda bu ihtiyacını karşılayıp karşılamayacağını bilmiyoruz piyasanın. Bu durumda nasıl bir değerlendirme yapıyor mesela İtalya? Bunu anlatabildim mi?
Thanks for the question. You touched a very key point that is true not only for byproducts but also for end of waste. And it's about the certainty of use, and it's about the presence of market. I show a picture related with a big hill of gypsum. For example, we know that gypsum has a relevant market, particularly in the market of construction and buildings. But, for example, those gypsum was there for years because our region, Sardinia, was facing a big crisis of construction buildings. And so there were no, for example, cement plants that were using that material. According to the Italian guideline, once it is a product, you cannot set any deadline to use that material. It's a product, so you have to store it, and you can use whenever you want. You don't, because sometimes in the permit you have a time limit. For example, if you not sell that material within 3 years, it should be considered a waste again. There are different opinions in Italy also. Some competent authority says, no, I want you to prove that you are selling the material. I want to prove that the market is still relevant, still present, and so you have to use this material. You have to prove the reuse of the material. Others are more flexible, and they say it's a product you can store whenever you want. I mean. So the role of inspection is quite tricky in this because, and it was my initial slide, when we speak about eco-innovation, because it's also difficult to prove that something that was not known in the past before, because it's something completely new. For example, if you are creating a smartphone didn't exist before. So it's something new, and you should prove that a new market exists, and sometimes it's difficult if this responsibility is under the shoulder of the local authority, because you have no byproduct decrees at the national level or European level. So it's up to the competent authority I think, to be flexible and to check if there is really the intention of the operator to sell and to promote this material, or if it was just a way to to have an income from receiving the waste to treat, or to store the production residue and avoid landfilling cost. Just one example, because I think that some operators still, they say I'm in the middle of circular economy, but some, I cannot say most, but some of them do the business receiving the waste, not selling the product. For example, some composting, we have operators receiving the organic waste. They are not interested in selling the compost. It's stored for years, and then comes the regional government that should find a solution. But they have no, strategy for selling this material, because their business is just receiving the organic waste, not selling the compost. So sometimes it's very tricky for the competent authority.
Çok kısa bir soru sormak istiyorum end of waste ile ilgili. Avrupa Komisyonu'nun yayınladığı 3 tane kriter tamam, ama onun haricinde ülkelerin tek tek kendi kriterlerini belirlemeleri uluslararası ticaret açısından çok kaotik bir duruma yol açmıyor mu? Yani örneğin İtalya'nın atık demediği bir şeye Avusturya atık diyorsa bunların işte gümrük işlemleri, bütün bu süreçleri dikkate aldığımızda sıkıntılar yaşanmıyor mu? Teşekkürler.
This chaos already exists, not only from member state to member state, but also from region to region. We have, when we go to case-by-case permits, so with a lack of also national criteria, we have some region of Italy stating that a material is an end of waste because the company was granted with the end of waste permit, but that product cannot cross the border of the region because it was not accepted by the other region in Italy. It was considered as a waste because they didn't trust the criteria that were adopted in the permit. So this is a real big issue. What we are doing in Impel, for example, with the waste management project, and I've just mentioned it, we are developing an end of waste database to collect case-by-case permit. Because at European level, we have a collection of national decrees, but of course when we go to case-by-case, it's a real chaos. So we want to store example of case-by-case, and in this database you can filter for the code of the waste, you can filter for the product, the kind of product, in order to homogenize the technical standards and the environmental standards that have been adopted in the case-by-case permit. So we want to share information available for both operators and for competent authority to share the same criteria. Because unfortunately, when we have a lack of national decrees, if we speak about national decrees, there is a filter of the Commission, even if the problem of uniformity still exists. But when we go to case by case, so permits granted at a local level, that's a big chaos. And we are trying to find this solution to create this database to collect as much as information as possible and to homogenize the technical standards so you can see for that product which standards has been used in Turkey or in Italy or in Belgium and which environmental standard they have to comply. So that's also creating a level playing field because the same company should comply with the same criteria in different member states. Otherwise, there is not a balance of for the businesses.
Should we have another question first? Let's please microphone. Can we have another microphone, please?
Thank you. Teşekkür ederim sunumunuz için Mr. Ruggeri. Benim sorum şu anda biz mevzuatta yan ürün onayı veriyoruz. End of waste ile ilgili bir prosedürümüz yok ama yan ürünle ilgili prosedürümüz var. Bu yan ürün verirken ikame edeceği ürünün standartlarına uygun olduğunu gösteren bir belge istiyoruz aslında resmi kurumdan. Şimdi end of waste uygulamasını yaparken bu 3 prensipten başka diğer maddelere de bu end of waste uygulanması gerçekleştirilirken yine böyle bir belge istemek uygun olur mu acaba mevzuatta end of waste'e karar verirken onu merak ediyordum. Teşekkür ederim.
According to the Italian legislation, the statement, the declaration of conformity is mandatory for the final product. And this declaration is a responsibility of the operator, and he is stating that the material is complying with the technical and the environmental standards that are set either in the national decree or in the permit, in the case-by-case permit. The problem, so, is in some way is proving that the product is complying with those criteria, and it will be up to the inspection authority to check if it's true or not. The big issue is how to set environmental standards or technical standards when there is a lack of international standards. You can have a leachate test in some cases, or you can perform a risk assessment in order to check if the recycled product has really the same impact on environment as the virgin material. So there are different strategies also used by member state, but the responsibility by means of a declaration of conformity is always mandatory, also in the case of end of waste.
We have a question in the back. Microphone, please.
Merhabalar. Arıtma çamuru enerji eldesi ya da çürütme sonucu tarımda kullanılması halinde İtalya'da yan ürün olarak değerlendirip değerlendirmediği konusunda bilgi verebilir misiniz?
Are you speaking about wastewater sludge? Yes. Yes. We have national decrees, legislation. We have also regional legislation, given more strict criteria on the possibility to use this sludge for agriculture. There are some limits in, of course, also in the water. It should be urban water, not industrial water. There are limits in the contaminants present in the sludge. There are requirements for the treatment of the sludge, and there are requirements also for the land where you are going to spread this material, and requirements also related to the use, to the way that this sludge is spread on the land. So we have quite already since many years we have this national legislation and regional legislation, and we have this possibility. Unfortunately, at least in my region in Sardinia, it is not so well. I must say it's quite common. It's quite common to use sludge for agricultural use. We have, right in these days, the Sardinian newspapers have reported about, I cannot say a scandal, but I would say that they are using this sludge for agricultural use without control, probably, and there is a lack from our side, unfortunately, because there is also a lack of resources from our side. But sometimes they are spreading in periods that they cannot spread. They are spreading this material in land where they cannot spread because of the kind of culture, for example, of the kind of land. So it's possible, it's done, but it should be checked. The inspection phase, it's really important because there are a lot of requirements that should comply with.
We have an online question. They can read the question online. And then we can proceed. They remind that we are going beyond our schedule. We might hit the coffee break, but it is important to get.
Çok teşekkürler sunum için. Çok kısa sormaya çalışacağım. Atıktan enerji üretilebiliyor olsa bile atığın yakılması döngüsel olarak kabul edilmiyor aslında. Sunumlarda bu şekilde açıklanmıştı. Atıktan türetilmiş yakıtın end of waste olarak kabul edilmesiyle bağlantı kuracak olursak atıktan türetilmiş yakıt üretilmesi döngüselliği sağlamış oluyor mu? Hem atık üreticisi açısından hem de atıktan instant üretilmiş yakıtı kullananlar açısından.
This is a question that you can see in the Italian newspaper right these days, because you know that Rome, the capital, has a big problem with waste management. There was a huge landfill that has been closed, and they don't know where to put their waste that is going across Europe everywhere. And they want to build a new incineration plant. And there is a big debate in the Italian politics among those who believe that energy recovery is part of the hierarchy, of the European hierarchy, and others that say that first of all we have to prevent the waste, and that feeding this waste incineration is not should not be a possibility, because mainly the problem is that the investment is so big that this means that you should feed this incineration plant, and so you are forced, and you are probably avoiding to prevent the waste, or you're avoiding to recycle the waste because you have to feed your waste incineration. It's a part of the hierarchy, energy recovery. It's not in the top part, as I said. It's in the medium or lower part, probably. In Sardinia we have two waste incineration. Honestly, we also suffer the problem that now we have a huge level, high level of separate collection, almost 70% probably. And so there is a lack of waste for our incineration. And so investors now are a bit complaining. That seems to be a paradox. So it's part of the solution in our waste management, but not the first solution.
Okay, thanks. Just for the question, because you explained very well the Italian situation on waste incineration, but I just wanted to add that nowhere in Europe waste incineration will be considered as part of circularity. It is already written in the taxonomy. In the Commission presentation, he explained that incineration is not included. It means it will never receive European funds, because it's not in line with circularity, and it's not in line with climate action, neither. For the reasons you mentioned, there are economic reasons, there is no circularity of material, and yeah, that's just to complete. No, it's not only Italy, the discussion is in Europe, but by the high authorities of Europe, the European Commission, it is finally decided it will never be considered a green action.
Just to complete, that's why, and I will present it later, waste incineration will not be funded by the resilience plan. So in the investment envisaged by our plan, landfill and waste incineration are not present because they cannot be funded.
Okay, we have one more question online which was posted, and then we have to go for a break unless you would like to skip the lunch. So what is the question online? If somebody can read it from the Secretariat. The online question, please.
Maybe in the meantime there was another.
In the meantime, there was another question, please. In the meantime, until they figure out what's the question.
Tabii bu yan ürün ve atık durumunun sona ermesi uygulamaları önemli uygulamalar. Ancak doğru onaylar vermediğinizde sizin de slaytlarda gösterdiğiniz üzere atık yığınlarıyla karşılaşabiliyoruz. Bunu ülkemizde de görüyoruz. Ancak örneğin yan ürün onayı verirken biz çok zorlanıyoruz. Yani oradaki kriterler var, evet, ancak o kadar çok proses var ki, o kadar çok atık çeşidiyle karşılaşıyorsunuz ki aynı kriterleri birden fazla prosesteki işte bu atıklara uygulamakta zorlanıyorsunuz. Karar vermekte zorlanıyorsunuz. Bunu siz de yaşadığınızı düşünüyorum hani İtalya'da. Merak ediyorum hani ne yapıyorsunuz ya da bu konudaki çözümü nasıl buluyorsunuz? Bunu bir sormak istedim.
I think that there are, I would identify two different solutions. The first one, of course, we need guidelines at a national level, and these guidelines, and we have some, and we also have some special decree for specific waste streams, because as you said, the application of criteria and conditions to different waste streams is sometimes difficult, so you need something specific. And we have now some specific byproducts decrees, for example, soil and stone or digestate and so on. And the second action is education and inspection, compliance promotion also, compliance promotion and compliance assessment. In the picture I saw you the figures of these huge yields of byproducts, supposed to be byproducts. They were pictures taken at the beginning of our inspection activity of Industrial Emission Directive installations. And it was our first inspection over there, maybe some years ago. They had no idea, also operators had no idea of how to comply with byproducts conditions, even if the decree was there. And in particular when the decree was not there, because in Italy we are not granting any permit, they are self-assessed. So it was a big mess. So the first thing is to be present to help operators with compliance promotion, when it's needed with enforcement and compliance assessment, and the second thing is having guidelines. We have now a very specific guideline for end of waste. We have some decrees for byproducts. We will have more in the future. And then we have a network of the environmental agencies that work together. So we have 20 regions in Italy and 20 environmental authorities. We are working together in working groups to share the same information, to behave in the same way, and also to agree on strategies toward the businesses.